We'll just wait a couple of minutes. Should I get up, or like sitting and taking photo? The photographer is here. If all the speakers could just get up for a small photo before we start the session. Yeah, all. Okay, great. I'll hand it over to the moderator now to take over the session. Thank you so much.
This is on. Great. Very good morning, everyone. This is an interesting session to start day 2 with. We are joined today with some of the leading folks from AI sector in the MDB space, or the multilateral development banking space, as well as use case leaders like Xtep, to talk about what it's going to take to mobilize funding and resources from the multilateral development banks for the scaling of AI use cases for social good and for economic growth. So this is a particularly important domain, and it's an area which we at the Gates Foundation have been looking at fairly closely for the last few years that we've been investing in AI solutions. It's been interesting to see the curve in terms of the aspirations and what AI can do for populations that we care about. And as we are now going past the pilot stage and getting to the validation stage of some of these use cases that we think will move the needle on key domains like healthcare, education, and agriculture, as those numbers and those validations start to come out, we're going to start seeing an increasing demand to scale these solutions up to population levels across states, across countries. And as that happens, it will need resources. It will need both capital expenditure as well as operational expenditure to run those. And that will have to be informed by good returns on investment. It will have to be informed by good public finance practices, which allow governments to make the right choices. And all of this is a evolving domain, particularly given that AI has been very rapidly evolving itself as a technology. And so we're really glad to have this opportunity to speak with this very distinguished group about this particular topic. I'll take a moment to introduce my panelists here today. We have Shankar Maruvada from the Xtep Foundation. Shankar, at least in India, needs no introduction as somebody who's been part of the core movement around DPI and digital in India, along with the entire Xtep ecosystem that's been very foundational to building these things. I have Mahesh Uttamchandani from the World Bank, who's the Regional Practice Director for Digital and AI. And Mahesh is also himself a digital leader and will help us elaborate a little bit on what sort of maturity needs to come into the system for it to be truly impactful. I have sorry, I'm missing my order here. I have Dr. J. Ganeshan from the Haryana Arjun SPV, Haryana's premier mission around using AI for their developmental needs. I have Antonio Zabalos from the ADB, and then I have Jay Chordia from the AIIB. I'm going to start jumping into the panel right away and start getting into questions with the panelists. A moment to get my notes here. So I'm going to start with my MDB guests here first. So Mahesh, maybe we'll put you in the hotspot to start with. What do you see as the opportunity for MDB financing And is it an area where you're seeing demand already from developing countries, or what are you seeing in the space in terms of demand, and what do you see as the opportunity for MDBs in this space?
Yeah, thanks very much. And first of all, thanks very much for inviting me today. It's a privilege to be here at this event in Delhi. I guess just to reflect for a second, I'm thinking back to November 2022, when certainly, at least in the World Bank, we were sitting around a table and everybody sharing their immediate reactions to the launch of ChatGPT, right? And at the time, this felt, it did feel important, but it felt like an incremental change in how technology might be applied to development. And we went very quickly from there to a discussion around how AI might be used to leapfrog certain development challenges, right? And I think that's still a valid point. But the technology has gone very, very quickly from being a kind of nice to have in the development context to absolutely mission critical. And I think in some ways, although it presents a huge opportunity, and that's what I think we'll spend most of the time talking about today, it presents a huge risk in terms of exacerbating the digital divide, right? So we went very quickly from, wow, this is something shiny and new and interesting, but probably marginal, to this is absolutely mission critical to delivering development. And we see that kind of bear out in some of the numbers. I think low-income countries account for only 1% of ChatGPT subscriptions. And I think we're looking at South Asia as being, Gen AI traffic in South Asia is only about 20% the level of it is in emerging market countries. So when we as MDBs think about, 20% of what it is in high-income countries. When we as MDBs think about how we are going to help finance this transition, I think we have to start to think differently about how we do business, right? And the onus is on us to do that. So financing AI transformation is not like traditional infrastructure financing. That's certainly not going to be sufficient. If we think about what's required for the AI transition, there are going to be a lot of high upfront costs, returning operational expenditures, and the tail of the benefits is going to be diffuse and long-term, right? So we can't look at this in a traditional kind of 4-year project cycle. I'm going to finance this bridge, build this bridge, and then more traffic will flow. And I think we then start to think about what are all the blended finance and other instrument tools we have at our disposal, right? So combining concessional funds, grants, trust funds, guarantees, mobilizing private capital, which is a huge point that I want to come back to in a second, and of course concessional and philanthropic funding to absorb some of the early risk, while the MDB lending and guarantees can be leveraged to crowd in private capital and private solutions kind of nationally and regionally. We think a lot also about our advisory work. So in India, in both Haryana and Telangana, we are working in an advisory capacity with governments to help implement AI sandboxes. And these are going to be environments in which solutions can be tested, verified, achieve proof of concept, and then move to scale. And that's increasingly how we are thinking about development solutions, which is how do we go from kind of retail solutions to wholesale. And I think sandboxes are going to be one element in thinking through how we test and do that. But every dollar of MDB capital that is invested has to be invested with the thinking of how it's going to mobilize private capital, right? We are going to be at our best, and I think Antonio will agree with me, a drop in the ocean of what is needed from an investment perspective. So where can public funding be used to either unlock or mobilize private capital? And that's, I think, a lot of what we think about. So I mean, I'll give you one small example of regulatory reform we did in the Philippines, where we helped the government institute a common tower framework, which then paved the way for more foreign investment in the sector, because it sort of, simplified the infrastructure investment and made it a lot more sense for private investors to come in. So these are the kinds of things we have to think about, where we're not just deploying our capital, we're deploying our kind of knowledge solutions. The other thing I think we need to think about is, in many cases, AI is at the tail end of a long value chain of technology investment, right? And AI solutions are not going to sort of appear out of nowhere. They're going to come from investments in digital infrastructure, computing resources, training data sets, and talent. This is all going to be indispensable ingredients to us doing this. Last couple of things I want to say. We, as MDBs, have to get more efficient. And one of the things I'm most proud of is we've recently entered into a partnership with our friends at the Asian Development Bank under what we call the Full Mutual Reliance Framework, which is a very convoluted way of saying that when countries want to borrow from us, they can rely on one institution's paperwork, due diligence, safeguards, and so on, and both institutions can then support the investment. So in Nepal, for example, we are partnering with ADB on the first ever digital investment that will fall under this full mutual reliance framework. It's a way of lowering transaction cost. It's a way of getting us to move more quickly, which I think is critical, and a way for us to kind of ask ourselves, how can we be leaner and more efficient? Last point I promise is we are thinking a lot at the World Bank about small AI, right? There's a lot of conversations around large language models. India is, I think, uniquely placed amongst emerging markets to be in that space. But there's a lot of need for smaller, targeted, potentially offline use cases for the use of AI, where these have to be deployed to end users at scale in what I would call low-tech environments. So if you think about AI solutions that are applying predictive technology to weather to help farmers in the field make better sense of planting crops, right? AI solutions that are being used for diagnostics in the health sector in regions that have traditionally been unserved or underserved by health services because they are very far afield and very far from kind of the core source of delivery of health services. So these are the kinds of things that I think we have to work in parallel on as MDBs, helping invest in infrastructure, helping through how to mobilize capital, but also deploying small AI solutions at scale to actually reach end users very quickly, because this is a now issue, not a tomorrow issue. Thanks.
Thanks, Mahesh. You said a lot of things that made my day. Small AI, shared practices to lower costs. These are all things that we understand really well here. And many of these are things that we've implemented in the digital space in good ways. The India AI mission is a great example of some of these sort of attempts to lower sort of ecosystem costs by doing shared practices, using each other's knowledge, sort of what you've learned and what you've validated for yourself. How does somebody else use that? So maybe I'll turn it over to Antonio. Would you want to respond to that, Antonio? Is this something beyond the collaboration that you have with the World Bank? Also a little bit more about that, and then beyond that, is this something that you see? How do you see the value chain of AI and digital evolving over the next few years, and how do you see the role of MDBs in that, and what opportunities do you see for ADB?
I think that now is working. So thank you very much for the invitation to be here, and also for the question. Let me just reflect a little bit on the question on what is the particular role of the NDBs in the way forward on AI. I joined the Asian Development Bank 1.5 years ago, and the two words that I have listened the most in these 18 months have been artificial intelligence. And every time that I'm listening the word, I have mixed feelings, I have to say. Mixed feelings in the sense that I don't know if the people really understand what AI really means and stands for. And second, if people really is ready to take the chance and the challenge that is going to represent. So the way we see, and this is basically the result of, in these 18 months, and my team can tell, I think that we have been traveling probably more than 20 countries. All of them are super interested on data centers. But the true thing is that for a data center to properly work, you will need the energy, you will need the human capital, you will need eventually the connectivity, and more importantly, you are going to need the demand. So I think that we are entering into a loop where countries just want to have a data center just because the neighboring country also has a data center. And on top of everything, the countries just want to have a bigger data center than the neighbor. But the true thing is that when this is happening, at the end of the day, there are some tensions in terms of the energy power grid that also needs to be included in the discussion. So AI is not just AI. AI is many different infrastructure that needs to come together, and behind there is a business plan that most of the time we are not talking about. So we are talking about investments in terms of billions of dollars, and at the end of the day, the role of the NDVs, is follow the demand that is coming from the countries. So we are just working demand-driven, and we also need to keep in mind that behind all those investments, there should be some cost-benefit analysis that estimates what is the impact associated to that investment. Because at the end of the day, this is taxpayer, and it's something that eventually we need to be co-responsible with. So the way I see this in the future is that there will be a crazy amount of investment where sovereign and non-sovereign is going to come together, and this is something that we actually are doing at the ADV. Second, I see more and more importance in terms of cost-benefit analysis and impact assessment on the investment that is being done. And third, also in terms of center for AI and creation of human capital, because at the end of the day, it's not just one country issue, it's also a regional cooperation and integration that needs to come together to make that investment more feasible and more sustainable. As part of that role, the FMRF, the Mutual Framework Reliance Agreement that we have with the World Bank is definitely contributing to that. As Mahesh is mentioning, we have a success story already in the case of Nepal, but we expect to replicate in some other countries around Asia Pacific, because at the end of the day, I think that this is a role for all the MDVs, and the size of the investment and the size of the impact is expected to be so huge that we are more powerful when we are together than when we are separated.
Thank you, Antonio. You've now brought this to a little bit of a more practical and tangible set of considerations and things like, is there good cost-benefit analysis? Has this been given enough thought in terms of, is it going to add value? So maybe I'll turn it over to Jay. Jay, do you feel like MDBs today, and firstly, would you like to respond to any of what Mahesh or Antonio said? And then the specific question I had from you was, do you feel like MDBs today have the right instruments to sort of support this sort of thinking for governments to scale up AI use cases? Do you feel like that's already mature? Is it maturing? Where do you see that?
Thank you very much, and thank you for having me. I think as MDBs, we have been financing digital infrastructure for years, and AI is a subset of digital infrastructure. So what changes? I think we have to see AI as its systemic nature that it is. AI for public services needs interconnected hard infrastructure, recurring operational capacity, and trust-based governance. Operational hard infrastructure we've been supporting for years, but to unlock the true digital potential of digital infrastructure, I think we need AI to take a much larger role. Now, I think MDBs have been doing a lot. We have a toolkit that has been supporting digital infrastructure for years. I think, but there are a couple of shifts that are needed. So beyond the interconnectedness of hard infrastructure, the trust-based governance, we also need to see the skills that are needed to deliver AI and the governance that is needed, and also the spillovers to other sectors, as both of the colleagues mentioned, energy systems, water, urban and industrial real estate. So all of this has much larger overlap and integration with what AI needs today. But focusing on what shifts are needed, so maybe a couple of points there. First is shifting from siloed projects to platform-centric financing. I think we need not support, or maybe it would be better to not support fragmented standalone projects, but rather go on a platform-centric approach. We've done this in digital fiber infrastructure. We've bankrolled thousands of kilometers of optic fiber. Similar kind of things can be done in AI, and that would just help reinforce its cross-sectoral nature, because then you can use the same infrastructure across sectors. It is much more efficient and it is much more useful for our beneficiaries. The second is a programmatic approach or the results-focused approach that can be helpful. From programmatic approach, I think AI's long-term viability depends on having some recurring cost available, maintenance, workforce upskilling, skills in place, governance, etc. So the traditional capex lending model may not be specific. An apt fit in this scenario, but then if we have a programmatic approach, we can deploy results-based financing or a host of instruments that MDBs have. Then we can take AI from demonstration to scale in a much more efficient manner. And case in point, we've done this in other sectors. For example, in water sector, cutting down the losses, removing inefficiencies, scaling manpower, putting in regulations, etc. So I think the existing template exists, so we can just replicate that. And lastly, very much echoing what Mahesh mentioned on private capital mobilization and the blending of various sources of funding. So I think there needs to be a sequential risk sharing among philanthropies or concessional funders, MDBs, and private sector financing. Private sector financing needs to come in. I mean, that's a foregone conclusion. But to enable private sector to come in, and remember, they need a bankable model to come in. So therefore, the early risks need to be taken with much more concessional money that can go ahead, prove some of the concepts, and then they can be scaled with long-term MDB financing that can come in long-term, that can support, among other things, as MDBs do, the governance, the safeguards, the policy side of things. So I think the shift is in narrative, in how systemically we perceive it. This is about shared infrastructure, service capacity, and governance. And just to make a point, I think at AIB, our strategic priorities squarely align with what AI needs. So we focus on green infrastructure, technology-enabled infrastructure, connectivity, private capital mobilization. I think those are all the points that our colleagues mentioned. So I think those are the points that are needed. MDBs are definitely have a unique role as conveners and de-riskers and system builders. So I think we are in a good place, but then we need to shift this, the viewpoint and place ourselves better to support AI. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jay. The clock's kind of showing up in my face, so I'm going to do a little bit of a script jump and compress stuff, because knowing Shankar, I know he'll handle that. But Shankar, firstly, do you feel like, one, are we ready for scale? I mean, is there enough evidence in the ecosystem that you feel governments will have what they need to make the decisions that scale can happen? That's probably just a yes, no for the most part. But then you've been part of this ecosystem of building blocks, platforms, networks, and then the sustainability of it for now years, and we've all learned from that experience. How do you respond to some of the discussions that we've had here? I mean, there's been talk about shared knowledge, shared infrastructure, templates, building blocks. What little bit of your point of view on this, having seen this played out over a few cycles, would be great to hear. But we'll start with, do you feel like there's enough maturity in the ecosystem to now start hitting scale?
I think 2026 is the year that will hit maturity. I'll give a few examples. 3rd February, Ethiopia launches its Ethiopia Open AgriNet advisory for farmers on AI. 11th February, Amul, the world's largest milk cooperative, launches its AI advisory for milk farmers. Today, as we speak, India is launching Bharat Vistar, the government of India's advisory in Jaipur with actual farmers. Within 2 weeks, federal, state, cross-continental. What is common to all of these? They all learned from a 9-month intensive trial and error experience that Maharashtra went through when they launched their Mahavistar back in May, and that was rolled out starting November. In AI, we know, as Mahesh said, we all remember the 30th November 2022 ChatGPT moment, but from the initial demos, the initial magic, the initial pilots to production, there's been a big chasm. Today, an organization needs to have a whole bunch of resources, financial, technological, data, to be able to use AI. If this persists, we are further going to be exacerbating the digital divide. The haves will get more, the have-nots will fall worse behind. Why this year is important is what this has shown. And by the way, all of this what happened is we compressed the adoption time, the learning curve, from 9 months to 6 months to 3 months to 3 weeks. This is not Step, Gates Foundation, World Bank, private sector players, India AI Mission, Bhashini, academia like IIIT Bangalore, IIT Madras. Because everyone knows one piece of the puzzle. It is the adopter who takes the institutional risk in putting everything together, and is their reputation on the line if the farmer gets wrong advice from AI. The farmer is not going to say, hey, I know the algorithm was wrong. They're going to get after the institution they trusted, which let them down. Now, that's a huge risk. Are there ways we can compress the learning time, the learning cost, and the learning risk? This year is going to be that year where operational models of various types will come out that give adopters confidence that the path from pilot to production has been hacked by someone before, and so they're following a well-trodden path, or at least a clear path. As Step Foundation, along with Gates and several others, we are starting with this summit, that as a civilization, as humanity, we need 100 such diffusion pathways by 2030 across sectors, countries, continents. Each pathway shows an adopter the journey they have to take, but they choose the pathway. You start with proprietary models and maybe you switch to open. You start with your data centers or somebody else's. The flexibility, autonomy, choice has to be that of the adopter. All we are doing as a collaborative is coming together, bringing the best of knowledge, creating impact on the ground. So these diffusion pathways are pathways to impact. It is the adopter who decides, where am I going? But the journey is always that of the adopter. And what my fellow panelists said, whatever we do is a drop in the ocean. This is a marathon that we are running to achieve impact, not a sprint. Unfortunately, it's a series of sprints. So you run a sprint, celebrate success, that gets more people, more motivation, more capacity, and then it goes on. Ultimately, the financing model has to be sustainable, whether it's inclusion and therefore government, and the costs are relatively much lower than any alternative, as we're seeing in Maharashtra, Amul, etc., or by private sector when they bring in the risk capital to earn the rewards. So how do you operationalize from pilot to production? And our bet, which 2026 will be pivotal, is create that infrastructure so that everybody is not hacking their own path. At the same time, you're not wedded to the path. You are wedded to your destination. The choice of paths allow you to switch when you are ready, when you have more capability, you can change tracks, come back. The last 2 weeks have shown us this is possible. This year will show the world that this is possible. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. It's an exciting year, and I'm more optimistic this year about AI scaling than I was last year, but I'm not sure yet whether that's just something that happens every year. So we'll know at the end of the year where we got to. But I'll also jump script again a little bit, and I want to give Dr. Ganeshan a chance to respond to some of what's been said so far. Dr. Ganeshan, you're leading Arjun SPV, and Haryana has very clear AI aspirations to use and apply. So you would, as an adopter, from what you're hearing from folks like us at the Gates Foundation, folks like ICSTEP on architectural thinking, and the MDBs on how scale might work out and what their role is. Would be great to hear your point of view on as an adopter. What do you feel that the ecosystem can do additionally to make that decision making process a lot more easy and a lot more rigorous?
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much. Some of the points have already been touched on, especially with respect to the challenges that the government experiences by my fellow panelists. I'll just put some of them in perspective so that it is clear. The first issue that the governments face is with respect to the AI projects is the sustainability beyond the project period, which was touched by the fellow panelist also. So what happens when the project period completes? How are we going to sustain? Where is the money going to come from is a basic issue. Over time, the data sets are going to increase. You need more compute capacity, and financing for such things have to be factored in. The second issue that normally comes up is the cross-department value and the single department financing. For example, in the AI project that Haryana is doing, the project cuts across multiple departments. So we are looking for building use cases across multiple departments, but the financing has to land at one single point, right? So where does it land? How do we take it across the departments is a challenge that we continuously face. The third was always already touched by Mahesh to a certain extent, is the timing and the flexibility which is required while financing the AI projects. The cross thing between ADB and the World Bank that was touched upon, which will actually help in it. Because since we do not have the structural flexibility, the experience with the World Bank and the other project is that it takes a lot of time. They have their stringent processes in place, and to get the financing takes up time. So the apprehension is once the project gets matured and the finance starts following, the requirements might change. So this is one challenge that we always have. And the other issue with respect to test before scaling up was always touched upon. So that is a great idea. So that is always a great idea, because what happens is that in the government sectors, we spend money, we start scaling it up, but then it ends up in no results. So it is always better that we test and then we scale up these issues. The one more issue that we face is how do we measure impact when it comes to AI projects? So when it is traditional infrastructure projects, we put up a bridge, we put up build power plants, and the impact is there to see. But then in case of AI projects, how do we measure impact? So the financing bodies must also give us certain framework by which we can show to the public and to the government that these are the impact that we have created because of this particular project. And one last thing is the institutional capacity that the governments lack while working on the AI projects. So we cannot depend upon consultants for a long time. We need to create capacity, and the funding institutions must provide for creating such institutional capacity. So to sum it up, the issues would be the sustainability part and the cross-department value versus the single department financing, and the timing and flexibility issue that comes up, the testing before scaling, and measuring impact and creating capacity. These would be the issues.
Thank you so much, sir. This is very useful, and I'll now sort of it also, I guess, puts the rest of the panelists in a little bit of spot to respond to some of that. But Antonio, maybe I'll call on you next. Based on what Dr. Ganeshan just said, do you feel like the MDBs are well equipped internally in terms of skills and processes to provide some of this support in terms of thinking through sovereign financing in solutions? Do you feel like MDBs are there with some of that skill set already existing?
Let me try to be a little bit provocative here. MDBs are a mirror in most of the cases of what we have in many countries in the region. So you cannot expect the MDBs to be a Silicon Valley and all of a sudden have a huge labor force already trained and with all the capabilities related to AI. We are facilitators, we are enablers, we are funders, financiers. We are eventually institutions that are working together hand in hand with the countries to make sure that $1 invested eventually is having a socioeconomic return in various sectors of the economy. So I cannot deny that we are adjusting as we move forward. Meaning that, for instance, for the Asian Development Bank, we have a number of priorities that could be comprised in three. One is precisely private sector development, because we believe the private sector is going to be one of the key drivers in such an era where investment is taking place. Second, regional cooperation and integration, precisely because the countries need to get economies of scale coming from a network economy. And you know, when we are talking about all the things that we are discussing today, we are talking about a network economy, same as energy, telecom. You know, the more is the traffic, the more is the data that is passing through, the lower is going to be the unitary cost associated to this particular investment. And third, which is the glue of the other two, is digital transformation. So we are precisely getting traction internally, both across the sectors and also at the, even at the board of directors, where there are particularly working groups related to digital transformation that are supporting the bank in terms of human and financial resources. But we are getting there as the demand, as I was mentioning before, is increasing. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mahesh,
Can I jump off script too?
yeah, please go for it.
I'll take
Yeah, absolutely. Please. You're anywhere next on my so go for it.
No, look, I agree with everything Antonio said. I mean, look, in the World Bank, in 2024, I think we deployed about 1.7 billion in digital infrastructure investments. I think our total portfolio stands at around 7 billion, which is both a very big number and in some ways a very small number, right? And it's indicative, I think, of how we can scale up in this space, which we've been doing, but also indicative of how much more work that needs to be done. And we have rightly focused on financing in this conversation. But I think, I don't want to trivialize the convening power that MDBs have, right? One of the things we're working on together with the ADB and with other MDBs is an AI use case repository that'll be launched very soon that will curate both large and principally small AI examples of how this is being deployed in real life examples. What are the conditions that are required? What's the technology that's required? What can people learn from this? I think this is really important. Another thing that we're doing at the World Bank is the government of Korea has asked us to set up a digital knowledge center in Seoul through which we will help share and export the Korean experience, which I think is one of a handful of really incredible emerging market to advanced economy kind of transitions, and how digital transformation has in many ways propelled this transition. And so we'll be exporting that experience, using this knowledge center as a kind of lighthouse to share that. So I think we bring something to the table that goes beyond our financing. Financing will be critical, but sharing that knowledge is super important.
And you really touched upon the one thing that I wanted to dive a little bit more into. So do you feel like, and I'll pass this on right after you to Jay as well, but do you feel like structures like the repository can actually, what needs to happen for these structures to be really functional for the purpose to be met that you have in mind?
Well, I think first and foremost, it's fairly simple. They have to be curated properly and updated frequently, right? What is it we say? We need to share efficiently and steal ruthlessly, right? And we need to enable that that for others to do. So that's a basic kind of knowledge function that we need to serve really well. But I think that a point that Jay made also that I think is very important is this concept of platforms is very important. And one of the things, again, that as MDBs we can do, because we are having conversations across government with multiple sectors, in some cases those conversations are happening less frequently between the sectors within government themselves. And one of the things we have learned, I think, is that individual siloed sector-specific solutions do not achieve scale. They do not have the network effects that shared solutions do. So the more we can do to bring these conversations together across health and education and finance, all of the so-called use cases that we talk about that are going to have their own shared technological platform and their own network effects, that's, again, I think, value add we bring to the table.
Thank you. And Jay, that question moving to you is really, how do you think MDBs can coordinate better in what Mahesh, and I'll ask you to repeat that, share ruthlessly? Share efficiently, steal ruthlessly. Lovely. So on that front, how do you feel MDBs can do better in terms of coordination?
Thank you. I think, first of all, on how our clients actually work, and to Mahesh's point, I think often things work in silos. So often one line ministry or department is not talking to another, and then they are duplicating things. And whereas AI works on cross-sectoral things. So we, as MDBs, can collaborate closely and avoid fragmentation. I think that's one of the important things to ensure that pilots move to scale. The good thing is that at system level, things are happening. All the MDBs on this dais are actually working together. I think AIB has co-financed and leveraging, relying on the co-financing frameworks of World Bank and ADB, a lot of projects. So that is already happening. In 2024, heads of MDBs, 10 MDBs came together and said we will work more as a system. I think those are good starting points. And I think that's exactly what AI needs. But I think to scale AI, two things could happen much more in a detailed manner. One is to build on common stacks and avoiding fragmentation. So digital public infrastructure, I think those are important rails on which a lot of things get built. So we need to strengthen by working together. The second is standardizing project preparation, cost templates, result outcomes, monitors, indicators, so that we don't duplicate things. There are a lot of things that are still emerging, the cost models or how you evaluate things or returns and things like that. So I think MDBs can collaborate on these costing templates, which can improve both access, which is how you process projects and fund projects, and also quality of how you have prepared a project, how well a project is prepared. So I think this division of labor, some of the MDBs may be expert in one thing and the others in another. So I think that division of labor would also go in hand on this aspect. So whatever one is expert at could take up and lead on that, and the other could take up on others. So I think all in all, there are foundations for collaboration, much well settled, but we just need to build on them. And I think going forward, we can have discussion on what projects to finance rather than how to work closely together. Thank you.
Thank you.
Evaluated. Once you figure out an architecture for how you can swap in, swap out models, continuously improve data, this need not be restricted to any one sector, which is the scale thing. also to any one area, which is the pilot thing. As we think of this, what we call as horizontals, investing to create reusable ingredients which can be put together by the adopter who's scaling it in ways that minimize risk and maximize impact. It's also efficient. So philanthropists play a very important catalytic role. This is what we are learning. It is, I'll give you a simple analogy to drive home the point. Somebody climbed Mount Everest in 1950s. If he comes back and says, I'm not sharing anything, right? You guys figure it out. Somebody went and created base camp infrastructure, camp 1, camp 2, camp 3. Imagine if they just packed up their tents and went off. Philanthropy can work with the early adopters to create those base camps and milestones so that the next adopter across sectors, across countries, across continents finds it easier. That we believe is the only way that we can guide AI towards equity rather than towards concentration. And philanthropy plays a very important co-creation and collaborative role with MDVs, with private sector, with academia, with not-for-profits, and with a whole bunch of ecosystem partners. But everybody should have their eye on the summit, which in this case is impact to the farmer, to the teacher, to the learner. If you don't have that, if you're looking at what our expertise is, it'll soon result in squabbles rather than there's only one summit, one goal, and that is improving the lives of the people we all have come here to serve.
Thank you. And I'll just say that this has been one of the more stimulating discussions I've had on AI resourcing. It's rare to find people who know this space and who have opinions on it, which are nuanced and mature. So thank you so much for taking out the time, and all of you for being here and sharing your points of view with us. And we really hope that structures like the AI Commons and some of the outcomes that come out from this summit will become the sort of substrate on which we can all collaborate and build sort of robust pathways to get AI to scale impactfully and appropriately. Thank you.
Sorry, before the speakers head off, we would like to have some souvenirs from the India AI mission be given to them. Richa, please go ahead. No, go ahead.